Eduardo, welcome back. I apologize. The video is going to be in a different outfit. Unfortunately, we had some issues with some of the recording, mainly on my part. I apologize. So without further ado, we're hosting Evan of the Creator Party. Evan is a successful international business development specialist with an immense range of personal and work experiences in multiple countries. Fluent in several foreign languages, the idea that forms the basis for the Solution Party comes from having seen the world from multiple perspectives. He has concluded that this is a critical time in history and urgent reform is needed so that the US can not only reverse its alarming decline, but most importantly, achieve its potential based on freedom and prosperity. So without further ado, I give you Evan. So Evan, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, my name is Evan Jaqua. I'm an international business development expert. I've got my master's degree actually in computer science in Japan, and then worked in Japan many years, not only with a Japanese company, but helping US companies access the Japanese market. I ended up living in China for a little bit as well, and then recently I've been mainly in Peru. Besides the business aspect of my life, I've had the opportunity to meet lots of people from different countries, different cultures, heard lots of different points of view, the different problems that nations face, that people in different countries face, but also seeing the commonality that we all share. And so based on multiple discussions with different points of view, people from around the world, I came up with this set of ideas. And when I say I came up with, they came through in the discussions. I can't say I take full credit for them, but sort of summarize them all on the website solutionsparty.org. What I hope to do, right now we're registered in Oregon as a nonprofit Solutions Party. I hope to make it an official political party in Oregon and then eventually nationwide. What is the Solutions Party all about? The most fundamental idea is that history has shown, and I think it's now self-evident, that power is addictive, and that once people get it, they don't want to let it go. And this is the fundamental problem with what's plaguing, at least in the United States, our politics and worldwide. You know, there's a reason why, for example, Putin kills political opponents, invades neighboring countries, rigs election. There's a reason why Kim Jong-un will send political opponents' entire families to gruesome concentration camps. And there's a reason why our politicians will do anything to stay in office. That becomes the priority. As George Will, the conservative columnist, said, he said, there's no difference between Democrats and Republicans in that their first priority is staying in power. And so as long as that's their first priority, that's going to skew their decision. We're sending people to represent us so that their first priority is staying in office. Their first priority should be working for us. But the problem is, as I said, power is addictive. And the only way to deal with that is like if I had to, if I were a doctor and I had to give you a highly addictive medication, well, what would be the way to minimize the probability of you getting addicted? We'd give you small doses spread apart. And that's exactly how power has to be allocated, in small doses spread apart. You have to have no re-election. You go in there, you have one chance to make your difference in history. There is no re-election. That's not a consideration. You can't be held in the puppet of the special interests, because the special interests aren't going to help keep you in office, because you can't stay in office. And then not only that, you have to put a 2-year waiting period between the time they serve time. And you can run for another office, but you can't run for it immediately after your term ends, because what's going to happen in that case is that they're going to use their present term as a springboard for their next campaign. Just like, Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor. He was running for president while he was governor. So he starts doing stuff that helps boost his presidential campaign. And is that really what his priority should be? So the Solutions Party is about reforming our politics and making it impossible for our politicians to become addicted to power. But in addition to that, we have to reform the political parties. I'm not that familiar with Elon Musk's new political party, but the problem with political parties, as George Washington warned, is that they become institutionalized. And the priorities of the political party become the priority over and above the country. And so political parties also have to be given a time limit. They exist for a certain amount of time, then they're broken up and you have new political parties coming in, because right now it's just completely tribal. People are voting Democrat, Republican like robots. There's no ideas here. It's completely tribal. So there's a whole set of different ideas to address the different problems that are really plaguing our politics. It's a complex series of problems that requires multiple mutually reinforcing solutions. And that's why in solutionsparty.org, there's a whole set of ideas to address the different problems. And I know that's sort of a long elevator speech. I'm sorry, but it's hard to say these things in 15 seconds.
It's all good. I completely understand. Context is everything. And I think that's what people seem to misunderstand is context gives you more information to be able to action on the information given.
Yes.
So I never worry about how long an elevator pitch is.
Well, let's say it's an elevator speech in that building in Dubai. It's 2,000 feet high.
That's fair. So I wanted to relate this into Canadian politics as well, because we have a similar situation where our politicians don't turn over as much. They get into power and it just seems like they try and just keep on their position as opposed to actually helping people. Especially with the latest election, we had just a disaster. It became very politicized as the US election did. It became a two-sided thing when democracy and politics has multifaceted parts to it, and everybody only sees the two popularity contests going on and just jump whatever party instead of understanding the ideas. So why don't we go into one of those points that you have on your creator Dara? How would we address this? Give me the top line item of how we first address this problem.
The first step has to be, as I say, making it impossible for politicians to serve more than one term. And so right now they can be reelected. So the first step that we have to do before this can be codified is you vote for people who promise to serve only one term. If the Solutions Party becomes a national party, well, anybody who wants to be a candidate, and by the way, you don't have to agree with all the ideas on the website, but there are certain fundamental ideas that are critical here. And so you vote for people who promise to serve one term. They're going to spend all of their time working for, their constituents. Right now, they spend at least half their time just raising money for their next campaign and doing political activities. If you were hiring somebody on a 4-year contract and they were spending half of each day just lobbying around the organization to get a contract extension, I don't think you'd be too happy with that. And neither should we. They should be dedicating themselves 100% of their time. And democracy should be a competition of ideas based on facts. But right now, what it is, it's a game of emotion manipulation based on lies. And they have all the incentives to lie because lying works. Let's face it, truth tellers don't win elections. And so this points to another very fundamental problem that we need to address, at least in our country, and that is the loss of credibility of journalism. If I had to give two things, it would be one is, the Solutions Party candidates promise to only run for one term and wait 2 years before running for a different office. You can never run for the same office again, because if you can run for the same office, all your decisions are going to be, or a lot of them are going to be skewed to getting eventually reelected. And it's just like you're not going to get reelected to that position. So you have one chance to make your mark in history. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to work? Are you going to work for the people and really work to make historic change and go down in history as somebody who did useful work? Or are you going to go down in history as somebody who basically, worked for themselves and their own self-interest? The other thing that we really need to do is to make our journalism credible again, because journalism is to politics what policing is to social order. If we have ineffective policing, then criminals will take advantage to operate with reckless abandon and impunity. By the same token, if we don't have credible journalism, politicians will lie with reckless abandon. They will say, a story says that they did something, this, and they just say, oh no, that's fake news. Because there's no credible set of facts that we can all agree upon, then they control the narrative. And once politicians control the narrative, then it's just going to be lies, and more lies, and emotion manipulation, which is exactly one of the reasons why Donald Trump is always calling it fake news, because he wants to control the narrative. So those two things are the most fundamental. Getting rid of re-election, taking measures to make our journalism credible again. Now, I can talk about the ideas about making journalism credible again if you'd like, or we can go on to a different topic, whatever you'd like.
I do want to touch on the topic of journalism. Here it's a little bit different. We actually get silenced by our government. We actually have laws in place that deem us misinformation if we do anything outside of our media structure, regardless of who we are or what we do. So we're our podcasts don't get recognized as much. Our podcasts get taken down more, that kind of thing, because the government controls our media. That's just how it is here.
We don't want the government to control, obviously, the media. Well, let me just back up a little. Why has journalism become so discredited? Well, one of the big reasons is because in the old days, to start a news organization required a huge amount of investment. If you want to start a newspaper, you had to have printing presses, you had to have reporters, you had to have an advertising department, you had to have a way to distribute the newspapers. It was a major undertaking. If you wanted to start a TV channel or a TV network, news network, that was hundreds of millions of dollars in investment, or even a radio. But right now, any Joe with a website and a laptop can start a news site. So what has happened is that the conventional news model has broken down because people can get news for free. Then what they do is they start going into these sort of silos, the news, quote unquote, news sites that tell them what they want to hear rather than what they need to know. And if you think of a military commander, which military commander is going to be most successful? The one who just hears what he wants to believe, or the one who listens to what he needs to know? And in a democracy, the people are the military commanders. And if they're just going to hear what they want to believe as opposed to listening what they need to know, what sort of decisions can you expect them to make? And so what we need to do is we need to recognize that news is no longer a viable business model because there's infinite supply. If you have infinite supply and demand breaks up. You've got to have, if you think of the pen mightier than the sword, what I do, you have to think of journalism as critical to our national defense as our armed forces, because our journalism protects us from enemies from both within and without. And so what we need to do is we need to have a pot of money that the government contributes to, that corporations contribute to, that anybody can contribute to. From that pot of money, we will give certified journalists a monthly stipend. So this means that if you get a degree in journalism, you will automatically qualify as a certified journalist. We have to certify our journalists, just like we certify doctors, lawyers, truck drivers, database engineers. We have to certify our journalists. And besides certification, you've got to grade them. So certification would be like the degree, like a college degree, or the equivalent, the analogous of a college. And the grading would be the equivalent of grades. So those grades would be based on evaluation. You could do a lot of this automated by how relevant are the articles, how neutral are the articles, how well written are the articles, how frequently do they write the articles, and based on that, their stipend can increase or decrease. But if they write articles that get consistently low grades, they can lose their certification. And this would apply for opinion columnists as well. You get these opinion columnists on Fox or whatever, who, if one party does it, it's great. If the other party does it, it's crime of the century. And we want to have our journalists principled. So from this pot of money, and this would bring back small town journalism, which is critical too, because small town journalism is not a business anymore. They can't support, it's just not supported by the market. And small town journalism is critical for keeping corruption at the local level in these small towns in check. We certify our journalists, and this is one point I want to make on this. Cody, if somebody who doesn't like you uses AI to make a video of you doing something awful and posts it on these quote unquote news sites, how are you going to say that that's fake? Well, if we have certified news sites and certified news organizations, the question will be, well, was that video posted by a certified news site, or was it posted on Joe Sixpack's World News site? Because if it's not posted on a certified news site, these certified news sites will hopefully do the due diligence to confirm if this is real or not. Then you can pretty much conclude that that's just a fake. And this is what we're going to need as AI makes it increasingly easy to come up with fake content that it looks really realistic. So we have to do these two fundamental things. Just to summarize, end re-election and come up with certified journalists who are supported independently of the marketplace. Some news organizations like the New York Times, for example, they're big enough, they might not need a stipend. We really need to have robust, as I get back to this, emphasize robust journalism. We need to make journalism something that is appealing as a career. So we get college students, or even you can have trade school for journalism, people getting into this and knowing that they can make a decent living, and maybe even a very lucrative living. If they write Pulitzer Prize winning stuff, they can get really a lot of money. But in any case, they can make a good living, a decent living as a journalist. And all they have to do is, report in ways that get them high grades. And so those are the two fundamental, and it can't be tied to the government, like you said in Canada, because you don't want somebody afraid to write a negative article of the government and have, the Justice Department coming after them just, in a trivial, frivolous frivolous way.
Yeah, it's definitely that way here. And people who do have journalism degrees are struggling to get into these bigger conglomerates that are taking all the money, essentially. So they can't even use their degrees unless they go with the system. And the system is basically saying, well, we follow government rules. So
yeah, and with this, you could have one person, one college graduate start their own news site. They're certified, they got their degree, and they put certified journalism logo on their website. And they don't have to be part of a big organization. In fact, in a small town, they might be, they just have their website, for Dixonville, Mississippi. They're certified and they get their stipend. They don't have to worry about, working part-time down to McDonald's to make ends meet. They can concentrate 100% of their time on reporting on local issues. Now, some articles, they catch the mayor in some corruption scheme, great. Or if Mrs. Smith's cat has kittens, okay. They're not going to get as high grades for Mrs. Cat and Mrs. Smith's having kittens article, but nonetheless.
But they're still important to those communities.
Yes, exactly. My dad in the early 70s, he was promoted to a salesman. He'd been a truck driver, but he promoted to a salesman at this furniture store, and they published an article on it. Back in the days, they could do that. People cared. This furniture store has now got a new sales guy. And, we want to go back to that, where the local shoe store has hired a new salesperson, or, things like that help bind the community together.
Simple things that make you feel important in your own community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in addition to the big article, city council is in bed with the local fracking company. And, it's kind of weird how this is working out. There's suddenly one of the city council members all have new Mercedes now, or,
That makes sense. I live in a small town, and it's still that tight-knit community. We have a local paper here too, and it's they celebrate the local successes. But yeah, it's dying even out here. It's weird because fast forward 5 years, local communities, small communities are going to thrive.
Right.
It makes more sense that we feed them more with proper infrastructure, proper finances, and to build them up before we have to handle everybody.
Exactly. Yeah, that's one of the big problems in our country and worldwide, by the way. This is a huge problem in Japan. Smaller communities are dying because you get this death spiral, I should say, where, there's a lack of opportunity. So the young people leave, then there's no next generation to add that new blood into the community. We can take measures to reverse that and make small rural communities appealing places to live and work. And there's some ideas on solutionparty.org to make that happen as well.
Yeah, I definitely think in 5 years' time, if we don't get our shit together, we're not going to be in a good place to support all this, but I hope we do. This is why I built my channel, is because I want to support us getting to a better place. And that's where I think people kind of lose out on the too focused on the bigger picture and not into their own lives. You've got to focus on what you can fix and what you can do, and making these small changes, like voting for somebody different or choosing something different, will give benefits to you more than choosing a popularity contest.
And as I say, democracy should be a competition of ideas based on facts. We've got to get the emotion manipulation out of the picture. We've got to get the lies out of the picture. And this is why another thing is addressing lying in our politics. Right now, they lie with impunity. Now, if you were interviewing me for a job and I lied during the interview, you would have every right to kick me out of the interview. Or if you you hired me and you caught me lying on the job, you'd have every right to fire me. Well, why don't we apply that same standard to politicians? If they lie, during the campaign, they should be disqualified. Mm-hmm. Or if they lie while they're in office, they should be removed from office, just like George Santos was. The way you do this is you have, about Rotten Tomatoes, like the tomato, you have multiple ways to fact check people, because you don't want to have just one fact checking organization. And, this could be, maybe some of the certified journalists, maybe they could you could certify them as a professional fact checker. And then you have AI as well. And so you have multiple AI programs that are certified AI programs. And you give them, if they say something that is factually not correct, if it's blatant lie, you give them a warning, don't do it again because you'll be disqualified. If it's a kind of one of those ambiguous, it's not really true, but it's more false than it's true. You have a whole spectrum of different warnings, and but you have to keep them honest, because if voters are not given the truth, they can't make decisions that they need to make about how they want their government to operate, how they want their society to function. And so politicians lying, who are the people who who are asking for the sacred power of the people. That's the sacred power of the people. They need to be given that based on the truth, not on lies. And so we have to hold our politicians, both candidates for office and after they are in office, accountable. There have to be severe penalties if they lie, just like there are severe penalties in the private industry. Again, if I lie during an interview, I'm out of the interview, and that's how it should be.
I would even add to that for Canada, specifically for Canada, we also have a structure of government, not just our elected officials, but our actual workers as well. I worked 8 years in the government, and my impression is the more you work, the more work you get. That's it. You don't get rewarded, you don't get extra pay. So anybody trying to do anything gets weeded out by those who are like, well, if I just sit here and do nothing, I get equal the same. First off, I want to apologize. The clip got cut off. We're not sure what happened, but we ended up missing a little bit, about 10 minutes at the end of this episode. So I apologize. Evan's view is clearly defined in well-researched and good intentions. And I think you should give him some of your love, especially if you live in the US. So hit up the Solutions Party wherever you can find it. I'll make sure to link the details in below. Give Evan some support because I think the US really needs this reform. Just heads up, I have one coming on Canadian reform too. Stay weird.